We added 3 locations in a year. It was not fun.
You have 10 locations.
Hi, I'm Chad Peterman, president of Peterman Brothers. It's just 3 people. That's the only infrastructure that's at a $9 million branch. All these businesses are built on operational excellence. If all you're focused on is these fandangled things, you lose sight of the operational piece. And that's the piece that makes these businesses successful.
So you're spending a ton of money on marketing and you don't know if it's working. So my friends over at Service Scalers, they're dropping this special promo for a $99 digital marketing audit. So that's going to cover your PPC, your SEO, your LSA. And what they do is they just open the hood and they take a look. They tell you what's working, what's not working, what could be optimized, and all the big areas for improvement. Check out the link below to schedule your digital marketing audit or head to servicescalers.com. Welcome back to Owned and Operated. Today, we've got a special guest on. We have Chad Peterman from Peterman Brothers. Welcome, Chad, to the show.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. Excited to chat and hopefully give the listeners some nuggets that they can take away and keep improving their business.
Yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get some good ones out of this. Can you walk us plumbing, HVAC, roofing now, but can you walk us through just like where Peterman Brothers is at so we can level set?
Yeah, absolutely. So company was started by my dad in '86. He was an HVAC technician. My brother and I joined the business. I joined in 2011, my brother a few years after. Started to build the company. At the beginning, we did a lot of commercial multifamily work. Today, we don't do any. It's all residential repair, service, replacement. We've added plumbing along the way. We've added electrical along the way. Roofing is a separate thing from this company. So really just the 3 primary services. Today, we'll do this year, we'll probably do 110, 120 million. We're headquartered in Indianapolis, but have 9 other locations kind of across the Midwest. So we go up into Michigan, Ohio, and then just this year, Kentucky.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, don't come any farther south, though.
We learned that when you cross the Ohio River, the energy standards change, and there's a few nuanced things. But Louisville's been doing really well for us. We've got a good leader down there and a really good team, so it's been fun to watch.
I haven't even thought about that nuance. Like my first thought, which is probably just like the most basic of thoughts, is licensure.
Licensing is interesting for sure. So we actually created, I think it was this year or late last year, kind of a licensing program where we incentivize employees to go get their license. So we've had guys here that have lived in Indiana their whole life, but then will go up and take the Michigan licensing exam, and we'll compensate them to take the license. And then if we use their license, we pay them a monthly stipend to hold it for the company. So we really work to create redundancy in our licensing. So we don't want just 2 Ohio plumbing licenses. We want 3 or 4 or whatever it may be.
I totally agree with that approach. We've done the same thing. I think that's a hard mental hurdle for like folks beginning to, because you're like, oh, you're literally paying someone. I'm imagining the quote. You're paying someone to eventually compete with you. And I'm like, yeah, I guess sort of, but like you also need it.
Yeah, it helps to have that to operate for sure.
You said 4 states. It was Kentucky,
Yep.
Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and 10 total locations.
Yep, you got it.
One of the things that's been fascinating to me, probably because we're in the journey ourselves. Like we're getting ready to do we had 5 locations, but it was all just in Northeastern Ohio. And then we merged into 1. A lot of the journey now has been like, okay, we think we're almost ready to branch out into our next location. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit with you and talk about when did the business decide to move to multi-location? How did that first 1 or 2 look, and how did you pick locations?
Yeah, so this will be about as unsexy of a story as possible.
I hope.
There's a lot of we just went for it. We had our first our second location first outside of Indianapolis we did that in May of 2018. And it was I had a service manager at the time who wanted to run his own location, and we were like, we had an acquisition, but ended up falling through. So we literally just opened up in Lafayette. We hired a team up there and just kind of went for it. It was very messy at the beginning, just trying to figure out like, oh, well, they're up there and we're here, and how do we do things, and so on and so forth. At the time, I think just to give people kind of an idea, I think at the time, I want to say 2018, we were probably 10, 15 million in total revenue at that time. So that was kind of the size. Now, if looking back, would I have done that at that point? Probably not, but it's worked out, right? And it kind of gave us a blueprint to how to do the others. The others have mostly came through acquisition outside of Louisville, Kentucky, which we just greenfielded. We hired a team and started from scratch. I would tell you, moving forward, that will be our model. So we already have 2 more locations picked out. How do we pick locations? So typically what I look for is we're in the Midwest. So, here in the Midwest, you got Chicago, which is massive, not going there. But you're looking for kind of what I call kind of tier 2 markets, like, Dayton, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky, Lexington, Evansville, all of those cities. And the main reason we do that is, one, we want to make sure that the town or whatever can support a business. But we also look at it as we're not looking to build a $20 million company in Lafayette, Indiana. What happens is as they get so big, then you got to start adding infrastructure. Yeah. And we support it all centrally, but it's like, how can I build call it 15, like sub 20? Like that's kind of what I want, because then I can still support it and I don't have to put a bunch of infrastructure like service managers and field supervisors. Like you don't need a whole lot of that. You need some depending on the size, but that's what we kind of look. And so now the model is, okay, find other cities, find a leader, put them in place, build a team, and then grow it. From there.
Yeah, I have so much to unpack here. Like acquisitions versus greenfield. I also think greenfield sounds easier. And maybe that's just because like once you've gone through a couple culture turnarounds, you don't want to do them anymore. Because that's to me what the acquisition is. That like the reasoning that greenfield's attractive?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like you see all these PE groups out here and they're acquiring these companies and stuff like that. Well, when you're using your own personal funds or, a loan from the bank, you can't go out and buy a $30 million company, like, especially if you're only a, 10 or 20, like it's very difficult. When they buy a $30 million company, well, that already has everything set up. It's literally like, oh, we just invested in the company. You keep doing your thing. Well, when you're buying sub $5 million companies, like one, their people worked at a small company for a reason. And then when you go and bring all your process and procedure and all of these things in, it can be a challenge. Now, we still have people that stayed with our acquisitions and they saw the value in working for a bigger company, and we're super happy to have those people. But there are quite a bit that just like, this is not for me. I don't really want to do this. And to your point, yeah, I mean, it's a big culture thing that if I start from scratch, I don't have to untrain any bad habits, well, we did it this way, and this is when Bill was in charge, we did it, this, that, and the other. And it's just, to me, when we started Louisville, like you talk about like, now it's a little bit harder in the startup, right? Because you don't have any calls coming in, you got to go generate them. So, your marketing costs are higher. It's a little bit more difficult, but the ease on the back end is so much better. Typically when we start a new location, we bring that branch manager and they work out of our Indy office for like 3 months. There is no location. They're just learning all of the ins and outs. Well, then when they go and do it on their own, well, they already have all of our process and procedure, and this is how things are going to run. And, you just go. So I think what'll happen is it'll be maybe a little bit slower start, but then it'll ramp pretty quick. Because we've already got everything in place.
When you're doing this, are you greenfielding in all 3 trades at once as well? Or are you starting off with HVAC and then you hit certain benchmarks and you open up those secondary?
That was my second question, because that seemed, especially I'll add with the scale, because I think that's an important thing to note. I'm trying to imagine, because we're 26 and we have all 3 trades, and I still feel really small. in those three. Like we're not deep yet into those trades. So yeah.
So we've done it a bunch of different ways. When we did Louisville, we launched all three trades at one time. So we went out, found an electrician, found a plumber, found an HVAC tech, install crew, sales guy, go. I think that's how we'll do it moving forward. So kind of our blueprint when we go in, it's find a branch manager first and foremost. Like I always tell people like, well, when are you going to build your next location? I'm like, when I find the leader that can lead a location, and then we'll figure out where we want to go based on where they kind of want to go to a certain degree. So you find the leader, you hire one technician in each of the trades, you hire an HVAC install crew, and then you just go. I like that. The only thing that we don't launch initially is excavation. So my brother heads up all of our excavation. That is one thing that is fairly centralized for us. It's starting to branch out as we launch it in other locations. That is primarily due to just the complexity of excavation. It's a little bit more difficult. But service lines, HVAC install, we launch them all at the same time. A lot of that is what we have found is that electrical and plumbing, obviously we know, are not super weather dependent. They're pretty kind of constant. So what we've been able to do is generate a lot of business for our HVAC side. Now that it's hot, we don't have to work. You don't have to worry as much about that. But it's nice to have all three trades that can kind of toss leads from one to the other.
Yeah, I had excavation was one of my question marks as I was thinking about this for both the complexity, but also like a CapEx requirement. Because with plumbing, HVAC, electric, you buy a truck and you hire somebody. But excavation, yeah, that can get pretty messy. So is it like one excavation crew is servicing all of them? Not crew, but like team structure?
Yeah, so we have excavation at 6 of the 10 locations, and all of those are central Indiana. So our excavation, I think we run 6 or 7 crews, and they touch all 6 of those locations. Now, when we, like our location in South Bend or even Louisville, like we probably will have a crew in that particular area. They'll report back into our centralized kind of structure because my brother oversees all of that. But yeah, we'll probably have a crew in those locations eventually. But yeah, it's difficult for sure. And just like my brother knows excavation better than most that I've met. And so it's one of those things where finding somebody who understands excavation is very difficult. So that's why we've remained kind of centralized to a certain degree.
I was thinking about this as we talked about greenfielding versus acquisitions, because like we were talking through it, and the thing that we didn't, I think it's easy to look at the output and be like, oh, okay, so launch 10 locations. Okay, yeah, here's the, pick this tier 2 market. Makes sense. But like the reason that you're able to do this is levels deep, right? Like the reason 100%. That, like your market pen is what it is. And like the education and onboarding piece seems like the big nut to crack. Cause I'm trying to imagine dropping a new location into Nashville. Jack, I'm coming. And Chad and I are working on it together. It's going to be fun. We're going to take on Chris. Let's do it.
I was going to say, you're not competing against me. It's like cool Ray versus you. But
the academy, like the onboarding and the continuing ed and like the Peterman way seems like the method to get there.
Yeah, so all of our people for onboarding come to Indy. So if they start, we onboard every other Monday, and they all come into Indy they're usually here for 3 days, and then I think we can do some of the onboarding while they're at their location. But that's critical for us, is they get all of the same training. We also have a department, it's called Direct Field Support, which virtually rides with a technician for about their first 30 days, maybe 60 days, but is there coaching them through all of this stuff. Because, even before when we had onboarding, you onboard a technician for a week and expect them to remember everything that you just told them. It's like, there's a whole lot to this. So that has been a really big win for us, is having somebody there that's like curating the onboarding as they're actually running calls. In the past, we just send a guy, send Bill with Jimmy, and Jimmy teach Bill everything and let me know when he's ready. It's like, oh boy,
Yeah.
this is a recipe for disaster. And so that's been really good. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, it's easy. Like when we first did it, I mean, we in 21 we added 3 locations in a year, and it was not fun. Like there was a lot of just like, what are we doing? How do we manage all of this? Whereas now we have a director of operations. She has 3 regional managers under her, and then you have a branch manager there. So each regional manager has 3 to 4 locations, and then they'll be able to take on more as we continue to grow. But yeah, I mean, adding a second location introduces complexity for sure. We do it now because that's our model, right? It's like, how do we build? I always equate it to like when you look at all these like tire places.
Yeah.
Like that's the model that we want to build. And it takes a little bit more infrastructure than just having one singular location. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves to refocus like, hey, Indianapolis is a big city. You could build a massive company here, like keep focusing on that. So we're always drawn back to that. It's easy to lose focus and just say, hey, I'll just drop another location and they should be able to do 3 million this year. It's like, well, yeah, but you know, it comes at a cost because you give up your focus on other things and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was going to be one of my other questions was, so I was talking with Eco the other day, one location in Columbus, and that is like 60-ish total percent of their business. How big is Indianapolis in relation to the rest of your branches?
So Indianapolis is probably 40-50%, I'd say, maybe closer to 50% of total business.
I feel like that makes sense because it makes sense as far as like the infrastructure has to sit somewhere.
Yeah, so all of our call center is centralized. A lot of our stuff is, I mean, all of our back office, obviously, really at a branch. So like a branch that does, call it, yeah, well, I'll use the Bloomington branch. They're probably 8 or 9 million in Bloomington, and they've got a branch manager, a dispatcher, a warehouse coordinator, and that's it. That's the only infrastructure that's at a $9 million branch. It's just 3 people.
I have questions on that.
Yeah.
So most of the questions, and maybe this is like, so Jack and I were talking about this right before you came on. And because I was like walking through, I told him that. I was like, yeah, so he's got the manager, the dispatcher. I didn't know about the warehouse guy, but that makes sense. And I was like thinking through the first 12 months of a new branch. And I was like, I mean, in my mind, I feel like you add, and maybe it's just, this is the launch versus this is what it looks like. But I was like, how would a brand manager tie into that? Brand manager being like, they are accountable for the leads being driven every day. And then are they on site or off site? And then like recruitment obviously seems like a real challenge. It almost seems like you throw a recruiter at that problem for the first year because, you know, it's leads and it's people. Like it's lead sales and fulfillment. And so how are you thinking about solving those challenges?
Yeah, so with those two, so we have 2 recruiters in-house. Obviously, they know when we launch a new brand, that's, you know, that takes a higher priority. So, but they're recruiting for all of them. Essentially, our recruiters are vetting candidates, and then they're setting them up for that manager in that particular location. On the lead side, all of that is, you know, obviously funneled through our marketing team. And we have a giant boards that are basically capacity boards. So they're pulling live data from Service Titan and basically telling our customer service center where we need to go. And then our digital team, primarily, because traditional media, once it's kind of placed, it's placed, but digital we can move on a day-to-day basis. So they're constantly shutting campaigns down if we're full in that particular area, or raising them up, or decreasing spend so that we can go get leads. I will tell you that one of the stresses of having multiple locations with multiple trades, so you essentially have 3 separate businesses at one location, right? They're all 3 different. So you've essentially got 30 different companies that our marketing team is trying to fill capacity for.
Yeah.
That has been the strain on us. We're potentially looking at bringing on some more help on the digital side so that we can, again, basically have one guy who takes 5 locations and you just watch the capacity boards and manipulate our campaigns so that we can drive leads there. And then maybe the other guy takes the other 5 or whatever that looks like. But I would say that is definitely one of the struggles is every branch and every service line needs something different at all hours of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge for us now. Same thing. We have 5 service lines because drains is broken out separate. And like there's a septic pumping from a legacy acquisition. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of like mental switch, which like there's a real cost to that of like, okay, well, I'm focusing on electric now, and electric's good. I hit my minimum calls for the day or my 3-day call board, but now I happen to not glance at like septic, which is a completely, and maybe we just shouldn't have that, but like it's a completely different funnel and like a completely different like customer acquisition than like HVAC repairs.
And so on that note, Chad, are you guys looking at potentially moving into any more verticals? Or is that 3 and done and then roofing separate and there's no more separate? Or are you guys planning on expansion out that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely areas that I'm interested in because I think you can easily add it, not easily, but I think that to me is where the acquisitions come in. You acquire not to build your current service lines, but more so to add in ancillary services. One that I really like, and I know that one of the big groups, I don't think it's Neighborly. What's the one that 1 hour? So Authority Brands, I talked to a guy where water mitigation is a big one that I think could be its own business. Now, there's an insurance component there that you'd have to kind of figure out to a certain degree. But to me, I mean, our plumbers keep I know this because one of my good buddies has a water mitigation business that we send all of his leads. And he's constantly like, we're growing. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm feeding you all this work, which is great because he's building his thing. But I'm also at the same time thinking our plumber they call it plumber before they call it water mitigation company to fix whatever broke. So if we're there, why not do that? So yeah, there's a bunch of different things that I look at. It's not on our immediate radar by any stretch of the imagination, but I could see once we really prove out this ability to add locations, I could see that being a thing where, hey, now to go get more growth, let's add something that maybe outside of the 3 primary trades that people think about.
We added that in 2020. Now, granted, we were like too small for it, I would say, when we added it, but it is good. Like it's good. Like average tickets in the 5,000 to 6,000 range. Small business, like it'll do $1.5 million top for us, but because it's attached to the plumbing company, there is no overhead. I mean, like literally none. It's like 45 to 50% cash flow, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, we've been running that for a few years and inspired by Roto-Rooter. So we were, Roto-Rooter's got exactly that. They have all these plumbers and then they added the restoration thing and we kept losing like drain cleaning, which I don't know that I personally, and maybe it's just because I'm a plumber, but I don't think I would like, oh, you don't have the cleanup section, so I don't want to clean my drain with you. But that's what was happening in 2020 because I think the location that we competed against added it. So we added it to compete and it's been good, but it is like, it's a different beast, just like anything else. It's a different beast. And I think it would end up looking a lot like excavation, where you have like a centralized, like this is what they do because you're managing insurance and you're negotiating and like the talent pool is totally different. But it is a big way to boost average ticket in a location because the average ticket is so big.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think the interesting point on it is, once you get a customer base, I think we've got 30,000 members. Like at the end of the day, just pick something and shoot out a text message and I'm sure you can do. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but I guess that's kind of how I start looking at it is like, okay, you've built this base, like what else do they need done on their home? You can probably offer it.
That was what Chris roughly said the inspiration was for appliance.
I was just going to bring
I think
that
they
up.
had 12,000 or 8,000 when they launched it, but they sent a message and it's an $8 million service line for them now.
Yeah, well, and he uses that. I've talked to him about it is, while they're not, that department is not like, it's not like the golden goose by any means, but it's a way of lead gen where other people aren't looking because it's not like there's like a big massive appliance repair companies sitting around the corner. So he's looked at that as lead gen. I think one interesting thing, I was talking to Ken Goodrich about this a few weeks ago is duct cleaning, and how do we utilize duct cleaning to go
Yep.
get maybe cheaper leads and then be able to flip that to a new system or
Yep.
IAQ or whatever it may be. So I think there's a lot of interesting things in the as as HVAC replacement leads continue to get more and more expensive. I don't think they're going down anytime soon. It's like to me, the question is, where do I go get cheaper leads that no one else is fishing in that pond?
Yeah, the duct cleaning thing, I never really understood why more people don't do exactly that. Because you can go, like, I think that's a good use case for an acquisition where, like, you can go buy a $2 to $3 million duct cleaning company. Or Jack and I were talking about this chimney sweeps, because it's not as easy of a correlation, but like chimneys and HVAC, chimneys and water heaters opens up a conversation for tankless or high efficiency or something like that. And that is something that, the leads probably cost like $10 or something on LSA.
Yeah, if there's even a provider.
Right. Like,
Like,
yeah, it's so we had that conversation because Jack lost one of his oh yeah, he's Googling it. Jack lost one
yeah.
of his installers to a chimney sweep company that was launching an HVAC department. And we were like, bro, why are we not going the other way on this?
In Greenwood, there's no LSA going on in the chimney sweep game.
Yeah. So like literally probably $3 leads to like
Yeah.
sweep a chimney, right? And then you go and like, hey, like, should we talk about your filter? Or even just turn it into a membership, because you can almost do anything and turn it into a membership. But the obvious complexity that you have here is you have 10 locations.
Yeah.
So,
It makes it a little bit more difficult for sure.
yeah, that makes it a lot more difficult. I don't even know, like, how would you imagine rolling that? A few months ago, we got our call center on Avoca. And Avoca is a AI call center solution for home service companies just like me, and probably just like you. They have a couple different products, but the one that we like the most is their coach product, which listens to every single phone call and runs it through a rubric to help our call takers improve. And this is a really big deal because we take hundreds, sometimes thousands of phone calls every single day, and it's just too much for our trainers and managers and leads to keep up with and effectively train. So it lets us do ride-alongs on almost every single call every day. Click on the link below to go to Avoca and make sure you use the promo code OWNED for a special discount.
So the difficult part, well, it's not really difficult. We do it today, but like, when you have one call center, they've got to be aware of, if you just launch it in one location,
Yeah.
they've got to be aware of that. Now, I would probably just launch it in Indy because I could be close to it and, it'd be super simple there. Whereas if you go launch it in Ohio, well, shoot, what are you going to do? And to me, maybe it's just a thing where, unfortunately, we don't offer that service in at that particular location right now. We're looking forward to doing that. We'll give you a shout when we do. And it may be a good kind of marketing piece of like, you could gauge demand and figure out where you're going to put the next one based on, what you're bringing in organically.
Chad, question for you. So we've talked a little bit about you growing into multiple locations and all this. Do you, like, when we're talking to Mello, he has this, giant goal of being a $1 billion garage door industry. What is your goal with this? What's the end, or at least the next goal post? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so, for me, it's really building what I think to be a somewhat unique model, in that it's a singular brand, multi-located, and not just, we got two, but we have 40 locations across the Midwest. Now, 40 is not next year. We've got a lot of work to do before we get to that level. But, to me, that's kind of, and it's similar to what Tommy's doing, right? He's building, for the most part, building one singular brand, A1 garage doors. Whereas that's kind of my goal, is to how can we build this? Because to my knowledge, Horizon has multi-location, but now, it's like they've got other brands, and that's an operation to see sometime. Dave's a great guy. I don't know that anybody's built this multi-location. There's a guy down in Louisiana, I think, that's built something like that, where he's got a bunch of locations. Can't remember the name of it, And I've never met him, but I'd like to. But yeah, that's kind of my goal of like, hey, how can we build this one singular brand kind of across the Midwest at this point?
What do you think a minimum viable branch is?
We bought our Muncie. We acquired a company. It was a $600,000 revenue company in Muncie, Indiana, and that was at the beginning of 2021. This year they'll do probably 12 to 15 million. So the scale, I think you can get there. We don't have a branch. Our smallest branch is probably outside of Louisville because it just started, but is probably 7 million. And that's a pretty small branch. Like they don't have a whole lot of, they don't have like a ton of people and do 7 million. So, my goal, or what I would think, I mean, I don't think you want another, I mean, it's going to be small to start, especially if you greenfield it. But to me, you should be able to kick out per month. We started the beginning of February. They're doing, call it between 2 and 300,000 a month, which will end up at 3.5 million. So to me, that's kind of where I would be shooting for. So like first
Yeah.
12 months, like 3.5 million is kind of like, okay, that's good. That would be what I would say. I don't know that you'd want to just have a location that's just consistently doing $2 million. Like, why do
Yeah.
you even have it?
You have a podcast,
Yep.
which is great, and I like it a lot. And when I think about the topics that you talk about, it's a lot of like leadership and culture and sort of explaining like your perspective. Was the original idea behind that like distributing your message directly to your own team? Because that's what it feels like as a listener.
Yeah. So any of the stuff that you hear me just talking and there's not a guest is actually me talking to a group of people live. So I did one this morning. I was up at 3:30 a.m. this morning to drive to lovely Fort Wayne, which is 2 hours from my house. And we do them because we do them at 6 a.m. before we get started with the day. So I was up there this morning. We were talking about leadership blind spots. And so I travel around to all of them and I do these and then we record them and we put them on podcasts. Well, when it first started, so if you go back and listen to some of the stuff from like I don't know when the first time I ever had a guest on, but a lot of probably over half of the episodes were just me talking to our team. And then that's the way they all are out in their truck every day. So what's the easiest way to consume that content? I said, well, we'll just put it on a podcast. And so it started as not, I wouldn't say it started as a podcast. It just started as, here's the easiest way to distribute this information. And it's kind of evolved into where now we're able to have guests on there and, provide value that way. Which is a lot of fun. But yeah, that's kind of how it started, was just getting information out to the team. It's even more beneficial now when I don't get to see everybody. 2018, when I started it, we just had Lafayette. So I saw everybody every day and there weren't nearly as many people as there are here today.
I've had the same, I haven't executed on it, obviously. But we do have a podcast, but we're not yet. I haven't used it in that way. What has been interesting though, and you likely get this a lot, especially with like where you are. I get fascinated because we don't ever really link the company. We don't directly mention it very often, but the amount of people that listen when they're on their way for a job interview is fascinating. And they bring up questions and they bring up, hey, I heard this. And it's like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, we get that all the time. A lot of our, especially like higher level, when they go to research the company and they find the podcast, what's a better way to get a feel for what the culture is going to be like at this company? And so, yeah, I've had the same experience as you, like, oh yeah, I listened to your podcast episode. Now, part of it may just be like trying to suck up in the interview, type thing, which is fine. I mean, as long as you listen, I'm good with it. But yeah, a lot of them listen. And I even had a lady that works, she's just started. She's only been here a month and she works in dispatch and or sales coordinating. And she came up to me and she's like, hey, I started listening to your podcast in the morning when I drive into work, and I really like it. And so it's cool to see people who, come into the organization, they find that as a resource. And a lot of people say it's kind of, to a certain degree, it's kind of, especially the ones that have been here for a while, it's kind of their way of being able to still connect with me, being that they don't work side by side like we used to. And so that's been fun too, to be able to, in some way kind of talk to them still. And I think it's too a good way like when you have something that from a podcast standpoint that's official, I guess, right? It's published, it's out there, people can consume it. It is, I think, nice to kind of serves, or at least I think it does. I don't have any facts on this, but kind of serves as that cultural beacon of the company, especially when you got layers and layers of management. It's like, well, I don't totally agree with my manager, or someone said something to me and I didn't like it today, but like knowing that, from the top, this is how we feel, this is how we expect people to lead, this is how we, deal with things. Like, I feel like it's been a good thing there. I will tell you that a lot of my content, and a few of the people here know this, I guess everybody will now if they listen, but a lot of the topics that I talk about are issues that we have at the company. So it's like, hey, we didn't handle this situation right. And then I'll do a talk on here's how we should handle it. And here's how we should lead. And here's some things that maybe some of you out there listening are forgetting about. And so, it's kind of an indirect way to hopefully add a little bit of context into kind of the problem solving that we're doing, and so on and so forth.
Something I didn't cover that I wish I would have. So I'm gonna bring us back. Lafayette was the second location. I think that is fascinating. And I think that the fact that everyone chooses about an hour away for their second location is fascinating. We're actively shopping locations, right? We have 3 in mind. I've talked to more and more people that have gone multi-location. So we've talked with Eco, we've talked with Tommy, we've talked with yourself, we've talked with Chris, we've talked with Logan in Cincinnati and Dayton and Columbus. And everyone picks an hour. I wonder if is it because it feels manageable? Because my first assumption was 3 hours. And it's almost like what I'm concerned about happened. And I guess you tell me if it did happen or what your thoughts are on it. But if you launch a location an hour away from another location, our lived experience from having a location an hour away before we merged them all was that one became a parasite on the bigger one. And maybe that was just a total failure to execute on our part, which it probably was. But 3 hours away feels like it's so far, it has to stand on its own 2 feet.
To give you a little bit of context, so Indy is obviously right in the middle of Indiana. So 4 of our locations are within an hour of Indy. There's essentially, and where it helps us is we pool our install labor between those 5 locations. So if Lafayette only has, let's just say, for example, they have 2 install crews, and Indy has 10. Well, if the guy in Lafayette or the guys in Lafayette sell 4 jobs for tomorrow, we send 2, and they sold them before the 10 got sold in Indy. We'll send 2 crews from Indy to go do that work so we can do it fast. So where it helps you is you can pool your install labor and you can move those resources around to go capture the work and get it done quick. So that's where it's really been helpful. Now, and what we're working on right now is a system. Ohio is, that'll be kind of a separate model. But what we have now is Fort Wayne is about, well, 2 hours from Indy. I know because I drove it this morning there and back. But it is only an hour from Muncie. So right now we can flex Fort Wayne down to Muncie. We can flex Muncie even up to Fort Wayne. So it's kind of like you're almost like building like these like connectors type thing. So Fort Wayne can now go up and help South Bend. So you're kind of building these things, and it's all just install. Like service-wise, they stay in their locales, they do their thing, whatever. Yeah. We may have a little bit of like, hey, we're shorthanded a tech. Can someone run from Indy and go run calls in Bloomington today? We may do that occasionally, not often. But a lot of that, and same with excavation. So our excavation, they actually will go to Fort Wayne. So they'll cover 6 locations. They all come to Indy in the morning to get all their stuff and head on out.
Yeah.
So that's why I think an hour, I think there's a piece that it feels manageable, especially when it's your first one or, you haven't done it before. I would tell you that has been the biggest benefit is we may have a bang up day in Lafayette and not in Muncie. Well, we're still winning because we can go put in more work than they technically have manpower.
The next question, and this is something that we're currently struggling with, so I'm curious how you think about this. We got to the size we are with vertical specific leadership and vertical
Mm-hmm.
specific teams. And we've been having a lot of conversations because we're trying to figure out like, okay, a step or two ahead of us, like we feel the strain of it and customers do too. Right. So like the feedback we'll get from customers is like, hey, it feels like I'm working with a different company between plumbing and electric. Because my first thought was with pooling install is how are you pooling leadership? If each branch has a manager, then like how does fulfillment get handled? And the way we're thinking about it is there's like a service leader, a sales leader, and a fulfillment leader, regardless of trade. And that would allow us to pool across locations, I think.
Yeah, so our leadership right now, and I'll preface this by saying a lot of it is who the person is. If you got a rock star, okay, they can handle a little bit more.
Yeah.
But the way we work now is really the branch manager is responsible for the service lines. So they're responsible for HVAC service, electrical, plumbing,
Yeah.
drains. They're responsible for the service. Our install manager is here in Indy. And he basically, yeah, the installers, they don't come from South Bend down here, but all the direction comes out of Indy. How we put in a system, what equipment, all of this stuff, all that direction comes out of Indy. And then the branch manager is just there to kind of coordinate and support. The same as with sales. So we have a director of sales and then a sales manager. They manage all the salespeople across the company for
Yeah.
HVAC. The only area that we have, and again, this kind of goes back to the thing I said at the outset, the only place that we have like one service line manager for the whole company is an excavation. And partly is because my brother runs that. So all of the stuff that's in a sewer and excavation business all come up to him. And that works in that specific area, but it may not work. We've talked about, do you have like a VP of HVAC? The tricky part is kind of splitting ownership. So like if I'm a branch manager, like what do I have control over at that point in time? Like it seems like everybody's just telling me what to do. So there's a little bit of that. We run into that in HVAC install a touch too, where like I'm not managing it, but I'm managing it. But do I have a one-on-one with this guy? Do I not? What do I do? Who's his manager? What is all of that? So that's something that I don't know that there's a perfect solution. I think a lot of it has to do with kind of the, just kind of leader that you have and what can they take on. I can see potentially some of that getting regionalized as we spread further. It works now because, 6 of our 10 locations are within 2 hours of one another. So that makes it a little bit more manageable. So that it's definitely something we're thinking about quite a bit, as well as like, how do you split those responsibilities and do different things like that?
The pain point that we notice is like, it's back to marketing. It's like a switching power thing where like, so we have a department heads, which is by trade. And then under them, they each have a call by call and an install manager, or sometimes several call by calls, depending on the size of the team. It feels like it's back to like, what's the leader good at, right? So like we have one of our leaders is like amazing at like training and handling like the service system. So in our mind, like that person is just over plumbing, but like they probably should be over the call by calls, which is over the service techs, because that's like the thing that they're the best at. And then we have another manager that's like amazing at mapping out fulfillment, but weaker on the service side. And it's like, because we've siloed by trades, we're like ignoring people's strengths, and we're like, the way their brain is having to switch, they all have the same issues, instead of just like, hey, let's focus and be the best at managing call by call and like service system in the trades. And then, hey, over here, let's run the best install, 40 crews we can.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I think to your point, it's just people are good at different things, right? And you're asking, when they're over a lot of different things, you're asking them to be a lot of different people.
Yeah.
All the time. So
what's the big challenge you see ahead of Peterman for the next 12 months?
I think for us, it's really kind of just ironing out kind of the continued expansion and kind of getting into a rhythm with it. I think that's going to be critical.
Well, 10's a breaking point for like franchises. Like 10, then 20 are like, and this is franchise world anyways, those are like the points, because you start needing more.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really where we're at. I'd say one of the other ones is just the marketing aspect of it, and how do we do that effectively for 10 locations, 3 lines, a piece, and it's like they all need something different. So I think figuring out that is going to be critical. They all need, hey, maybe we got to go spend, 12% over in this market where we can spend 6 in this one, and kind of
Yeah.
figuring out what's that look like and how do we cut up the marketing budget to make sure that everybody gets what they need. I think that's a key. And then, I think it's just, when you go into these other locations without a whole lot of brand equity, how do you, attract technicians, attract customers? So I think that's really where we're kind of focused in on is solving those problems.
How do you view AI taking a role in your business in the next 12 months?
It's something that's out there, right? We're all using it already, whether we like it or not. Probably a lot of the people that you talk to on the phone may not be an actual person. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something we're kind of wading into, and figuring out, how can we best use this? I've been guilty before of trying to find, the next shiny object and be like, oh, we're going to take over the world with this thing. And it's like, well, maybe we'll just kind of wait and see kind of as it happens. And it also changes so damn fast, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a year ago, no one was talking about AI. Whereas today it's like, oh, well, everybody uses Chat GPT. It's like, okay, well, let's figure out what that looks like. So I think, I don't know that we have a definite plan for it, but I think it's something that we're aware of, and like, hey, how could we utilize this to, better deliver service?
I remember 4 Seasons in Chicago. I think they're like a good lesson in like shiny object. I'm hearing this like third hand, but
Okay.
they're still running like 2008 and earlier technology in most of the business, which I think
I went there last year. It works for them, and they're very, very successful. But yes,
yeah.
it is. You're like, you're dispatching this many technicians with that over there, that thing,
Yeah.
and it's super antiquated. But they're like, it's our stuff, it's our baby, we built it.
I think it's a good lesson. Yeah, and exactly that. Another one would be I was in Phoenix last spring, and I remember like I've obviously heard of Parker and Sons. I don't even know how many times, and I saw their vans. I was like, "Are you serious? Like, these guys are industry makers?" Because the vans are like, 2005 called. They want the wrap back.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even think it's a wrap. I think that's just like
No, it's like
almost
some
like
decals or
letters.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So yeah.
I think it's like a lot of the stuff that gets hailed as best practice or anything now. Like if you look at some of the largest players in the industry, they're not doing it.
But I think it comes back to, all these businesses are built on operational excellence. It is,
Yeah.
how do we operate?
Yeah.
And what they found out is they know how to operate. And, you don't have to look the flashiest or anything. I mean,
Mhm.
I think some of that stuff helps for sure. But if all you're focused on is these fandangled things, you lose sight of the operational piece. And that's the piece that makes these businesses successful.
Like I think the cultural communication that you're driving, that's a little bit outside of operational. That's just like raw leadership, but it's good. It's really good. Yeah, I can imagine how good that would be inside the team too, because I do feel like you get connected. It's innovative, it's also simple, and it's sort of the way you operate. But I think that's an advantage from the outside looking in. That's an advantage probably. Like I know it's an advantage, but I think it's even more of an advantage than you think it is from my own seat because I'm not doing it and I see how much of a disadvantage not doing it is.
Yeah, and I think that's key. If you said challenge, and that just made me remember something like challenges that we're looking at. I think it's just like getting used to being big. One of the things we hear right now is like, oh, we have our company has a bad rap in kind of the plumbing community, like with plumbers or whatever it may be, because because plumbers are like, well, I don't want to go there and be held accountable and follow process and procedure and do all of these things. I would rather just work for this guy over here. I can make about the same amount of money and not just kind of go do whatever I want to do. And so that's been kind of the interesting point that we have to solve for, is how can we be a big company yet still be marketable to an industry that for so long has just been kind of Wild West, and just do whatever you want. Who cares about inventory or not? Following the safety handbook and driving scores and all of this stuff that
Yeah.
we look at as like, oh, this is a great thing. We're organized and we have all of this stuff. But what I believe is that most people, they always say, oh, you're getting too corporate. Getting corporate is just getting organized. to a certain degree. But it's making sure that organization feels natural to your team, especially when they're not used to it.
It seems to happen in layers, so I'm curious when you're going to tell me the next one is. But that seems to happen at 5.
It's coming.
Yeah. Well, and I know that we're just getting through sort of the next one. And it happened, and I didn't see it coming. We went from a 3-tier org chart to a 4, which shifted everything in the organization. And that was one of them, because now I'm like 3-4 layers removed from 90% of the organization. And that's where I think the communication that you're doing like is in alpha. Yeah. More process, more expectation on the people that report to me or report to those people. And then that just trickles down. And we've definitely seen some of the people who have been here since we were $1 million shop really struggle more with just sort of like we don't see it as complicated. It's like, we're a mid-sized contracting company. Like, we need to, have basic accountabilities, but it is a struggle.
Yeah. One tip I'll give you, because we learned this, is that if you do a survey of your company, more than likely the one thing that comes back that sucks and needs to be improved is communication. What we started doing that's really, really worked is when we roll out a change, especially the one that trickles all the way down to the field, is our COO does it and he crafts the message. And then we just have a meeting. Everyone's on Zoom. Everybody's there. And he is the one who delivers the message. Because what we found was it isn't, or what we believe it to be, is that it isn't there's a lack of communication. It's just the communication breaks down when it has to it's like a giant game of telephone. It breaks down all the way through. So we have our regular service meetings and different stuff like that. But any big changes, it comes from one mouth, essentially, and everybody gets the same message, because you can imagine, we just roll out all these like different things, and it's like this message, once it travels down and out to different branches and here, there, and everywhere, it's going to be so convoluted that people are going to be like, the communication around here sucks. Well, it's not the communication, it's that they didn't get the right communication.
When we originally, and again, we haven't done it yet, so we haven't executed on this idea, you have, but when we thought of this internal podcast thing, and like one of our use cases was exactly this, of like, hey, how do we communicate this thing or this training or whatever, this like core value that we, need to dive into. So this is just, me reminding myself that I have to actually do that. But yeah, that makes sense. Like, especially as you add more stuff, like one of our big transitions recently was we went on to Nexstar like 6 months ago. That was a huge transition. That's absolutely ridiculous. And obviously a lot of changes like followed that, which like we did not roll out well. And anyone listening to the show that currently works for me, I'm sorry, but like, I know we didn't roll out well. That was my bad, but it is challenging. And I can only imagine that it gets harder with multi-location, because it did for us. And we had 5 locations, and they were all basically in Akron, Cleveland, which are like an hour away from each other. And that was a challenge to communicate. Well, this was great. I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you being as transparent as you've been with us. I think this has been an eye-opening conversation, I know, for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help. And hopefully there's some value gained out of a lot of lessons learned. But yeah, happy to be on here.
If anyone wants to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's probably the best place. I have, along with you, been following your example on the Twitter or X game, which you do a great job on there. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place, or you can just shoot me an email. It's just chad@petermanhvac.com.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and everyone, thanks for tuning in to Owned and Operated. If you like what you heard, make sure you check out ownedandoperated.com. Give us a 5-star review wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. It helps our moms know that we're popular somewhere on the internet.
Zing.